for this quickly organized event on agriculture and food security in the WTO. What can MC13 deliver? So this is organized by Madhyam Third World Network, and Our World is Not for Sale, which is a civil society network. We are organized under that umbrella. We call it OIMS in short. And we know that, how agriculture has been this probably one of the most political tracks under the WTO since its inception. And we don't see that, so there were, questions about Western subsidies, how to discipline Western subsidies, and developing countries were, in fact, they were lured almost to bring agriculture under the WTO umbrella, because they were told that Western subsidies, which were massive and which were hurting farmers across developing countries and LDCs, they were told that this would be disciplined, and they were also told that, special and differential treatment would be given to them. They would be given flexibilities which they could use to develop their agriculture sector. But now, nearly 30 years down the line, we don't see really any of it happening. We haven't seen Western countries discipline their subsidies, but we also see that special and differential treatment has been under major challenge at the WTO. So coming to MC13, today's discussion is really about what can we expect. And we've seen previous many ministerials fail to deliver anything concrete on agriculture for developing countries. And for most of our countries, agriculture is the largest sector, accounting for the largest share in employment, even if its share in GDP may be low, and it's a critical sector with mainly small farmers across all our countries. So it's not just about livelihoods or food security, it's also cultural, it's a heritage actually. So our agriculture is not, in most developing countries, maybe apart from the big agricultural exporters, it's really almost still family oriented, small farms, and farmers who are very small scale and still have pretty precarious conditions of work and livelihoods. So in that kind of scenario, what do we have? What do we expect from MC13? So I don't want to put words in the speaker's mouths, but basically we've seen that topics of interest to developing countries which were mandated, which were being negotiated under the QAS, the Committee on Agriculture, under special sessions, mandated from the Doha round. Those have been, which is the permanent solution on public stockholding, the special safeguard mechanism, also cotton subsidies given by developed countries, which have affected livelihoods of cotton farmers across developing countries, especially in Africa. So all these issues, ministerial after ministerial, they have been blocked. We don't see outcomes which were mandated, which were agreed. For example, the permanent solution on public stockholding, it was agreed in 2013 and then reaffirmed by the GC decision of 2014 that it would be given by 2017. But we have seen 2017 ministerial, then we saw the MC12, and then now we seem no way closer to a permanent solution or a special safeguard mechanism or cotton. But we know that there are these other issues which are continuously coming up, which is countries should not restrict their exports at all, countries should open up market access, they should have higher transparency, and all these are being kind of offered as solutions to the food security problem. We've recently seen massive food crisis across the globe, and which is specifically acute in developing countries, NFIDCs and LDCs, and they are being told that the solution is you do not need policy space, you don't need to increase production, you just open up trade. And we've continuously seen this, and in MC13 we believe things are still, that conflict still kind of continues to hold, and we do not expect that developing countries will get the outcomes they want. But the question, it has, I think, become a battle of mandates, who can get which timeline, and which issues should be prioritized, and then what is the solution for food security. We are also seeing this new agenda being thrown, that reform agenda, reset, let's look ahead, and like it's completely start from zero, and then we don't know whether our, all the things we fought for in the Doha round, whether they'll be preserved. So those are all the questions before us today. So I have 4 great panelists, and we are especially indebted to Ambassador Dandi Iswara from the permanent mission of the Republic of Indonesia in Geneva. He's the Deputy Permanent Representative. And thank you, Ambassador. I'm thanking you especially because we know how busy, how crazy the schedule is. So we really appreciate the time that you could give us. So Ambassador Iswara would be our first speaker. And then we have Ms. Jane Nalunga, who's the Executive Director of Siatini in Uganda, and she works at Siatini works at an all Africa level on many issues, including on trade and also on agriculture. Then we have Helene Bank, who's the board leader of the Norwegian Trade Campaign and special advisor to the Norwegian Alliance for the Welfare State. Helene has also been a long-time civil society expert and activist working on trade issues. And then finally, we have Professor Abhijit Das, who is now an independent researcher, but he was the former head of the Center for WTO Studies in New Delhi and also from Madhyam, India. So he has actually been a negotiator, then he advised the government of India for a long time, but now he is fully independent, right? So free to speak as he wants. Okay, so let me not waste any more time. I'll hand it over to Ambassador Iswara. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't mind if you pull me out from that negotiation because I think I feel at home here because we can speak quite freely, especially this is a lot of, I think those who are here as speakers do have concern about the agriculture negotiation. Very important for any countries in the world, including developing and LDCs, even in our IDCs, how we can gather together and find a common ground on every issue. So on the agriculture pillar, for market access, domestic support, export restrictions, export competition, as I said, continent, especially the public stockholding. It's very timely that I thank very much TWN, I thank very much the Owens FS for organizing this important meeting. And of course, I know the time is quite small here for less than an hour. So I'm just going to be brief. That up until now, there's so much going on in terms of each members coming in, 164 members coming in right now, want to have an outcome on agriculture. And each of them, of course, have their own point of view, have their own positions. And of course, like a country like Indonesia, in agriculture, we do, most priority for us is two priorities. One is about special and differential treatment, preserving the special and differential treatment. This is including the on domestic support, the development box from any future capping or reductions. And of course, the other one, the priority is adopting and agreeing on permanent solution to public stockholding. These two are very important to us because we are developing countries. We have 200 million people that need to preserve the food security. This means that these two, it's not about us trying to expand our agriculture industry, trying to expand our market. It's about us feeding our people. It's about food security. It's about us having affordability, having accessibility and availability of that food within our country. And just to have a bit capture on many of the members seeing that they not want to deal with public stockholding, especially permanent solution of public stockholding, because they see PSH as a market distortions. A lot of narrative is out there saying if you preserve public stockholding, it means you're controlling the market. It means you are disturbing the market. It means it's difficult for any country to enter their agricultural product to that members that are preserving public stockholding. Well, I can say that is not what happened. Indonesia is one of the example of we are preserving public stockholding. We have rice public stockholding within the minimis level up until now. We use them for food security. Many example or event like on the COVID pandemic, we use that public stockholding to feed our people, to distribute the rice to all over 70,000 islands in Indonesia. And up until now, we did import rice. So we're not closing our rice import from any country that produces import even from our neighbor, from Thailand, from Vietnam, Cambodia, we still import. I think for the last year, 3 months at the end of the year, we import somewhere around 3 million tons of rice from Vietnam, from Cambodia, from Thailand. So we don't stop our import. We don't restrict our import for rice because we have public stockholding. We preserve that as our food security. How we can distribute that stock at the time where our people is needed, and we still preserve that within the minimum level, even way below the minimum level. So that's one of the reasons why that public stockholding is very important to us. That policy space is very important to us. That food security policy tools is very important for us on public stockholding, and that's the reason why we are engaging heavily on the discussions, on the negotiations for agriculture. And yesterday we have a G33 ministerial meeting. Almost 47 of our members are attending the meeting, and that meeting we did have a joint statement, ministerial meeting. I think I hope all of you have received that joint statement. If you want, we can distribute that to you. On that statement is basically we are one permanent solution of DSH on this group, and of course we want an outcome, a special settlement mechanism. That is also important. So many members in the G33. So that including where we want to have a discussion or implementing the document, our proposal. The proposal from three big group, the African group, the ACP and G33, proposal 229. If you look at this group, it consists 80 members, so almost half of WTO members. And it consists, if you count how many people, population within that 80 members, is 80% of world populations within that 229 proposals. This is very heavy, this is very important. This 80 members do really need their food security. It can be delivered, but if we agree on public stockholding. So I think that will be some of the note, and of course, I'm looking forward to hear from all of you what we can learn from you, what happens in your point of view in non-government organizations or any organizations. We want to hear more what is happening, because I've heard also from my colleague India that right now there's demonstration from the farmers. They do concern of what happened here in WTO, so we want also hearing that. And of course, this is a good event where we can find the tractions of these negotiations, where we need to hear from you, we need to learn from you. So I'll take a stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. And yes, for pointing out about the 80 countries, the G33, the African group and the ACP submitted this proposal, which was in 2022, before MC12 in fact, right? But it was never discussed, never negotiated. And you said that's 80% of the population actually, right? World population. So that's, but that is still blocked, and even in MC13, do you have any hope of, what is your, maybe one line expectation?
Of course, we want the because it's been 2 years. The proposal is in the members in the WTO building, and we want that to keep pushing that the 229 proposal as a text-based negotiations. All the elements of PSH is there about EMS, about ERP, even about export of PSH. We know that some members don't want to have the export of public stock holding. We open if they want to delete it, we open if they want to make more strict of export, we're open for negotiations, but it never comes from the other side. They even come up with the capping. If you have this special product support, this is your level. If you export the product, then those public stock holding is not in your entity. I mean, those negotiations shows between we want PSH as a food security, and the other thing is they want market access. The balance, we still try to find the balance of that gap, and hopefully we do still hope that we want to have a permanent solution of public stockholding. 229 is the base proposal, and of course some groups also are trying to see other options, whether it can expand the Bali Plus. But that's also still on discussion and negotiation. It's negotiations. WTO is 164. One member saying no, then the whole agreement falls. So we need to find everyone still on board, still on the same page, to find a good balance. Find that sweet spot is challenging. It's doable.
Thank you so much also for that note of optimism. And yes, we know that attempts are being made to put in the permanent solution under the domestic support, right? The old track, and that everybody cuts. And there are papers from Abhijit's actually ex-center, which says that under that proposal, where all domestic support is supposed to be, clubbed together, including development box subsidies, and then if everybody is supposed to take on cuts, then actually it's developing countries which will cut more in effect. So thank you very much for that. Let me now call on Jane Nalunga from, as I said, who's the executive director of CRTV. Jane, over to you next, and we hope to really hear what it means for Africa.
Okay, thank you so much, Ranja, and good afternoon, and thanks also to the organizers of this session. Ranja has already pointed out the multifaceted nature of agriculture in developing countries, and in Uganda it's also, or in Africa, I'll talk about Africa, it's also the same. Agriculture goes beyond just food security. It's our mainstay of our livelihood, providing employment, providing export. And for us, it's the basis of economic development and structural transformation. And if Africa is to develop and to structurally transform the economies, the basis is going to be agriculture. So an outcome here would be really, really important. And agriculture in Africa is facing many challenges of climate change. But again, when you look at the challenge today on the table, the challenge of the debt, we are heavily indebted. Agriculture can be a solution to that challenge. There is also the challenge of population growth. Agriculture, if we handle it right, can be a solution to that. So Africa, we need a solution. But as has been pointed out, the solution is not for scamming. It's like we are moving one step forward, going back, maybe about 4 steps backward. Because I remember when we were in Nairobi, that was the 11th Ministerial, even Argentina, there was a lot of optimism that maybe the special safeguard mechanism, the public solution to public stockholding, that we are going to get it. But now it's very, very far away. So we need to look at how we strategize and see how we address the issue of agriculture. So how do we move forward? These are just proposals. When you look at the framework within which we are negotiating the agreement on agriculture, the issues around subsidies, export and domestic subsidies, issues of market access, reduction of tariffs. This is a framework which we got from, historically, from the Ugai round. That's the framework which was there. And that framework was addressing challenges being faced by developed countries at that particular time. Maybe we need to rethink that framework, whether it's really working for us. Because it was a framework to address issues of the high subsidies which were given, addressing issues of export subsidies which were being put in place, and also looking at tariffs, market access, reducing addressing the issue of protectionism there among developed countries. So it wasn't, that framework wasn't necessarily looking at issues of production, the challenges which you have in Africa. It's about production. It's about increasing our subsidies so that we can be able to support our small-scale producers. So the issue of rethinking that framework which we inherited, I think would be very, very important. The issue of policy space for us is also important, and I think this is where the special safeguard mechanism comes in, you know, and also the issue of the public stockholding, the role of the state. Because when you look at what's happening today, most of the issues on the table are limiting the space, the policy space, the ability of our governments to do what they are supposed to do. For us, the issue of a special safeguard mechanism is important to enable our governments to support our economy against import surges, which is very critical, because today we are negotiating a number of so many free trade agreements, and we are liberalizing even more, even within Africa. We are negotiating, we already still negotiating the continental free trade area. Even there, it's about liberalization. We are liberalizing even more, you know, among ourselves, but we are not equal. You know, Uganda is not equal to South Africa. So we need the special safeguard mechanism to be able to counter the liberalization. Another issue which I want to point out is the issue of looking at maybe other issues outside agriculture. Because if we are to protect agriculture, maybe we need to get out of the agricultural domain. I'll give an example. In Africa, agriculture suffered a lot because of trade liberalization. We liberalized not just under the WTO, but we liberalized under the structured adjustment programs as conditionalities under the World Bank and IMF. We opened up our economies, and that's why today we have the cotton issue. Cotton issue is double because of the subsidies being given by developed countries, but also because we liberalized so fast, very, very fast. We liberalized, and also government reduced its support to agriculture. So we have challenges of textiles, cheaper textiles coming in. We have challenges of second-hand clothes coming in. We have challenges around growing of tomatoes in Ghana. The tomato industry completely collapsed. Recently, we had a challenge of the chicken parts from Europe, you know. That it destroyed in West Africa the poultry sector, but it destroyed also the maize production, because maize feeds into the poultry feeds completely, you know. So we need to look at issues also around trade liberalization, you know, and it becomes really critical when we liberalize, when there are no safeguards at all. So that's why a special safeguard mechanism is really, really important. Other issues which we need to look at, you know, even here related to agriculture, for example, is the issue of investment. You know, investment also becomes really, really important, and what the outcomes are going to be here, because government again needs policy space to be able to direct investments to where it's supposed to go, to ensure that investments don't displace our small-scale producers. So the outcome of the investment agreement here will affect agriculture. We are also negotiating other agreements, like I said, free trade agreements, and they have provisions like export restrictions, don't impose export taxes, don't restrict exports. But you can't industrialize and add value without ensuring that you limit the outflow of raw materials, outflow of agricultural products, so that we can be able to add value. And that brings me to the issue of the industrial policy. We need all those tools to ensure that we industrialize, we add value. Because the moment you don't value to a product, it loses value. And that's the problem we have been having. We are commodity export dependent, and the prices are falling down every day. And the moment the prices fall down, the people leave, especially the young people. They leave agriculture to the old people who can't go anywhere. So those linkages of technology transfer, corporate technology, all those, we need them. And that goes back to the issue of policy space to enable our governments to be able to put appropriate policies in place.
Thank you so much, Jane, for that really broad perspective, and also, in a way, the specific strands that you were talking about, which is outside the agriculture area, like investment, right, and technology, and these issues and raw material and all these, they kind of come and link back to some of what's on the table, right? Like we see that there's this big push that no country should restrict exports at all, but as you said, it then kind of goes back that countries have to open up their raw material to other and mainly developed countries, and we know investment, that we are seeing the challenge over the investment facilitation agreement, but also even our other agreements, the investment agreements, we face these challenges. And technologies, again, I think in the WTO we see technology making a very slow incremental push. I think the US has taken some proposals, so that's another track that really has to be watched. Thank you very much for that. So next I'll move to Helena, and I've already introduced you. So I think, so Helena is the board leader of the Norwegian Trade Campaign and special advisor to the Norwegian Alliance for the Welfare State. And as I keep saying, Helena is the long-time expert activist actually working on agriculture, fish. So,
okay. Thank you very much for the invitation to this panel. I will talk about the context under which I speak. Because I'm humbled coming from a country that are always pointed at because of agricultural subsidies and high protection, Norway. In a country so wealthy that hunger amongst its citizens is because of poor policies, not poor finances. What Ambassador and Jane Malunga tell, starvation and death can easily be part linked to lack of policy space on multiple sectors in your countries, while it is not that in our country. Still, in these times of multiple crises, there is a need that arable land are kept in production in a sustainable way to secure a minimum of self-sufficiency with means necessary to produce food on steep mountains, mountain walls and short seasons. Self-sufficiency in agriculture in Norway is about 35%. So we are net food importers, or net agricultural importers, as we do sell a lot of fish. Therefore, Norway also now restarts a program of public stockholding. So against this background, Norway and its citizens have all reasons in the world to support the demands by many developing countries to have the right to public stockholding, special and safeguard mechanisms to efficiently be able to react to import surge, in addition to development box, as you were talking about, Ambassador, and more efficient support to cotton subsidy problems of common support on the cotton subsidy problems of many developing countries. The multiple crises of climate change, natural disasters, war and conflict, pandemic and price crisis has also reached the industrial world the last years. So suddenly they become more aware of their own problems, but it's now very, well, it's very bad to see that the reaction to it is how do we solve those problems and make them general instead of solving general problems. It has exposed how vulnerable our current system is. Globalization and the global trade system has facilitated a global division of labor and global food production chains that requires no crisis. It requires that everything functions according to theory and every one individual has almost the same purchasing power. This is not where we are today, and for many people in the world it has never functioned. In 2050 it's estimated in need of doubling of food production. But of course production is important and distribution. I want to recall the background for today's imbalances on trade routes in food. When the WTO was created, it suddenly involved all parts of our societies in a free trade framework. But some were freer than others. In food production, all countries' existing level of production and subsidies were frozen, assuming that this were the rational level for their markets, production systems and natural conditions, not taking in that many countries of the global south was under a harsh, as James said, harsh structural adjustment programs. Their level of protection and subsidy and other things were not rational according to their needs. Therefore, many industrial countries has more policy space than their southern counterparts. The trading system since the agricultural agreement and WTO established has cemented policies that has facilitated not only global division of labor, but also large-scale food production and monopolization regarding input, trading and retail, meaning a concentration of power. It includes and facilitates just-in-time delivery of all goods and services, including food and inputs to food production. The industrialized countries have had and have historically many means to secure production and livelihoods of its farmers. Most developing countries are not allowed to use even the same means or comparable means. Food security is, as it says, security politics. It should be treated as such, with a preparedness approach. In the WTO negotiation in agriculture, we have seen coalitions of countries along 4 lines. First, the 2 lines, it is about net food exporters and net food importers. And the first are lucky, they can export and they are safe. The people who got hungry in its domestic politics, then they had the reason for it. The other are net exporters that are developing countries and net exporters among industrialized countries. And among those 2 lines, we need the right to protect those who are net food importers, specifically in developing countries, to have the rights for the needs and policies that they need. The net food exporters that are subsidizing at the same time as they are industrialized and have net food or net positive balance of payment, they do need other policies, but they should not be the one to guide how we are running the policies. So what times of crisis has shown us, new policies, including new trade policies, are needed. Trade is a means, not an end, and food security is security policy. And that's why I think we have all good reasons to demand across all citizens in the world that production methods that can last for future generations need to be a part of WTO reform. Right to public stockholding, included purchase from domestic farmers. The space for special and safeguard mechanisms secure that countries' production is not undermined, and export means so that subsidized food are not undermining world market in those who are exporting, and that it is not withdrawn from countries because they couldn't put export restrictions on their production in order to secure industrial policies, as Jane mentioned, and also secure that there actually are food in your stocks. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Helene, for pointing to that complex scenario, because you come from Norway and you have your own problems, but in a way we are seeing these solutions which also haven't worked in developed countries being kind of exported to us in the global south. Thank you very much for that. So with that, let me call on our last speaker, Professor Abhijit Das, former head of the Center for WTO Studies and now independent trade policy analyst.
Thank you, Ranja. I'm grateful to the organizers for organizing this very important panel, and I find myself in the midst of a galaxy of distinguished personalities. So thanks, Ranja, for putting me into that panel. Some of you might have heard of a very famous Indian personality called Mahatma Gandhi. He's called the father of nation in India, and the statement commonly attributed to him is the following. He is reported to have said that for the poor and hungry, if God were to appear on earth, then he would have to appear on earth in the form of a bread. In this panel, we have His Excellency Ambassador Iswara, and in India, in many Indian languages, Iswara is God. So it's sheer coincidence that Ambassador Iswara is leading the charge on behalf of a large number of developing countries to make sure that the food security, livelihood concerns, rural development concerns of literally hundreds of millions of their small farmers, poor, is not compromised, is protected, is promoted, and how best can WTO rules respond to the challenges. It is in the fitness of things that at Bali we had the Bali Peace Clause in December 2013, which got further clarified in the November 2014 decision of the General Council. But there are many reasons why whatever we have in hand is not sufficient. First and foremost, the Bali Peace Clause applies to staple crops and for schemes that were in existence in December 2013. Of course, countries are free to implement new schemes on new products, but in respect of those schemes, the 10% de minimis will have to be respected. Those schemes, those products cannot benefit from the Bali Peace Clause decision. Secondly, some of the conditionalities in Bali Peace Clause are fairly onerous to comply with. In particular, some of the notification requirements are very onerous. Third, some of the conditionalities in the Bali Peace Clause are ambiguous. To give you one illustration, the anti-circumvention clause, which says countries shall not distort trade or adversely affect food security of other countries, might sound very simplistic, but seen through a legal lens, it's a minefield. We really do not know how this provision can get interpreted if it is subject to review by a WTO panel. And fourth, if we look at what is happening under the Committee on Agriculture, attempts are clearly being made to chip away at what we already have, what already exists, namely the Bali Peace Clause and the November 2014 decision on public stock holding. So let's make no mistake, let's remain under no illusion. Bali Peace Clause is a big help for developing countries, but having said that, the flexibility that it affords is under threat, is under attack. And that provides the justification why countries like Indonesia, countries like India have to work hard towards a permanent solution. It will address not only 4 or 5 of the shortcomings which I mentioned a few minutes ago, but it will also provide, hopefully, more legal certainty to these countries to implement their schemes of public stock holdings. And let's remind ourselves, it's not just about Indonesia's Raskin scheme, it's not about India's minimum support price scheme, it's also about similar public stock holding schemes in Pakistan, in Jordan, in Turkey, in Tunisia, in Zambia, in Kenya, in Zimbabwe. Such schemes are being implemented by many countries. Unfortunately, the narrative which seems to have got created is that it's just India, Indonesia. No, not at all. It's a very large number of countries, developing countries, who are implementing these schemes. And for them, it's not a question of dollars and cents for their agribusiness. It's a question of a few grams of food for the poor and hungry. And that is a point which we really need to bear in our minds. Some of the WTO membership, particularly the developed countries, they say, yes, agriculture is very sensitive for us. But that same sensitivity they are not willing to extend to small, resource-poor, intensive farmers in developing countries. And I think if the WTO really is to work for the poor, is really to work for most of its membership, then sooner we have the permanent solution, the better. Just to give you one illustration of importance of the Bali Peace Clause and the General Council decision, during the COVID period, the government was able to provide subsidized food grains to close to 800 million of the poor, hungry, the needy in India. And the reason why government was able to do that was simple. We had public stocks, we had public stock holding, we had rice and wheat in sufficient quantity. Particularly for rice, if the peace clause had not been in existence, our minimum support program scheme would have had to be unraveled, would have had to undergo very substantial changes. Luckily, we had the assurance of the peace clause, because of which we had the stocks. But the peace clause, I said, for the various reasons, is not sufficient. We need to have the permanent solution. Linked to that issue is special safeguard measures. I'm delighted that this issue has been mentioned by the 3 distinguished panelists preceding me. It's an issue not only of protecting the farmers against import surges or dip in import prices or dip in prices of imported commodities or specific products. It's also an issue of equity. Let's remind ourselves that under the Agreement on Agriculture, all the developed countries have recourse to special safeguards. A handful of developing countries, only a handful of developing countries have recourse to this measure. And even those who have recourse to this measure from developing countries, most of them can cover only a small percentage of products. Indonesia, if I'm not correct, can have recourse to special safeguards only in respect of 1% of its products. Whereas a country like Switzerland, a country like Norway or European Union can access special safeguards for more than 1/3 of their agriculture products. So there's certainly an issue of equity involved here. There's an issue of making the Agreement on Agriculture less imbalanced. There is also an issue of protecting farm livelihoods. So from all perspectives, the need to come to a more practical, implementable, ready-to-use SSM commends itself from many multiple perspectives. Similarly, the issue of cotton. All of us are aware what is happening in cotton, how a particular developed country is dragging its feet, refusing to move, despite the Hong Kong ministerial decision to address the issue of cotton subsidy explicitly, specifically, ambitiously. These three issues at the Nairobi Ministerial Conference were put at a separate pedestal. Now attempts are being made to put these three issues in the overall comprehensive negotiating basket, and developing countries are being told that, well, we will negotiate on these three issues provided you agree to negotiate on other issues of domestic support, market access, etc. That goes against what happened at the Nairobi Ministerial Conference. And if today ministers take their past commitments very lightly, they don't give serious consideration to decisions of the past, how can we have the assurance that what is decided today or what is decided on 29th of this month, within a few ministerial conferences, those decisions will not be junked as well? So it's really for the sake of predictability of the multilateral trading system. Ministers have to demonstrate their commitment to implement past decisions and implement them on priority before we get on to the task of reform, the general reform of the global agriculture system. And I think that is a point which we really need to bear in mind. So with that, I will just close my statement. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your very kind attention, and we'll be very happy to answer questions. Thank you, Raj.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Abhijit, for that, and really reminding us that past, and especially in Nairobi, these were reaffirmed, that these would be, they were separately reaffirmed that these three issues would be resolved. But since then, so many ministerials too have gone, and we are nowhere near. And now a new agenda, it's like you forget everything that's happened in the past and start afresh, which is simply not possible for developing countries. And as they've continuously said, that their food security will be served best by resolution on these outstanding issues. And as all of you mentioned, policy space, because it frees up policy space for them to address their own needs. Abhijit also thanks for kind of reminding that our ministers really need to seriously meet their past commitments, what they have agreed to, because it just cannot be forgotten and then you move. You can kind of keep many new commitments in every ministerial without respecting previous ones. That cannot work. So with that, let me open up the floor for questions, comments. Whoever, yes, please identify yourself, and then if you're addressing the question to a particular speaker. So, does that work?
Thank you. My name is Doug Palmer. I'm a reporter for Politico in Washington, D.C. I have a question for the ambassador. I am from Washington, D.C. I cover trade. I follow these issues from a distance and don't often have the opportunity to hear a speaker from Indonesia or India or other countries outside the United States talk about these issues. So I appreciate the presentation today. I just have a very, basic question, which is Indonesia. Could you just clarify to me again Indonesia's position on public stock holding and the idea of launching a broader agricultural negotiation? Are you saying that Indonesia opposes launching a broader agricultural negotiation until this public stock holding issue is addressed? Is that the position of Indonesia? And then also, I know that's not the topic of this conversation, but since you're here, and I don't often have a chance to talk to people from Indonesia, could you clarify to me what is Indonesia's position on the e-commerce moratorium? Are you opposed to extending the e-commerce moratorium until MC13.
Thank you very much. We'll take, I think, if there are more questions or comments, we'll take those here.
Hi, Brett Fortune from Inside U.S. Trade. Apologies if the tardiness. I had a question about the idea of expanding the scope of the WTO negotiations and how that may run afoul of the Nairobi outcome. I was wondering if you could explain a little bit more how my understanding of MC10 is that it was kind of a seminal WTO because of the ministerial declarations vagueness on the Doha, and whether or not that was an ongoing negotiation or the failure for a consensus meant that it was not renewed. But some members obviously think that you can bring in new issues because of the vagueness of that, while others don't believe that. So in terms of dealing with public stockholding and special safeguard mechanism, why would linking those things with negotiations on domestic support and market access, why would that be in violation of the MC10 outcomes?
Are there any more questions or comments? If not, okay, let me hand it over to the ambassador for your response.
Right. I'll respond to Ted, right, from Washington.
Yeah.
Indonesia's position on PSH is we want the permanent solution of PSH. That's because we've been working since there's a decision on Bali peace clause. So that's a mandate from earlier MCs. That's very important. We want to uphold the mandate. We don't want to dilute the mandate, lowering the mandate. That's because we believe that mandate is agreed because the negotiation, the hard work, all position has been agreed on that declarations within that mandate. So if another mandate diluted the before mandate, that's not going to happen because we want every of those mandate is to progress to a more stronger mandate. We have mandate on public stockholding. We have mandate also on SSM, that's on Nairobi. So we need to keep that momentum, not lowering the mandate that's already been agreed by our ministers before, our MCs before. So what we are trying to push, and we've been doing constructively and positively engaged with all the proponent and non-proponent. Like we engaged before we put that proposal, 229 proposal, with African Group, ACP, and G33. We've been engaging with the non-proponent, giving that, what do you think about our PSH? What do you think about the element of the modality of PSH? And we're not doing that. We talk with these three groups and then put it out to all membership. Before we put it out, before we discuss, we are having these communications, non-proponent. That's very important because when we need to hear from the other side, and that's on PSH. And on other 6 pillars, of course, from Indonesia, each of those pillars, we do have concern and positions. Within every class meeting, we voice out our positive engagement. We don't want also that every pillar of market access, domestic support, export restriction, export competitions, what else, content, need also to grow within the discussion within members. The idea of where PSH and SSM already have mandate, need to be preserved. The other 5 pillars also need to have mandate, and we want to discuss that with all the members. And just to maybe some analogy, these 7 pillars. Let's say we have 7 kids go to university at the same time. We want our kids as soon as possible get up university because you're eating our money. Right? We're spending a lot of money for you to go to college and education. As soon as you are more ready to finish your school, as soon as you are out from the schools, and be on your own. That's my analogy of all that 7 pillars. If PSH already have that maturity, we have mandate, we need to finish that, and all the other 7 pillars. But the idea of all these 7 pillars is not the same mature of that discussion. It's not the same modalities of that discussion. We are open for any engagement by those who are proponent of domestic support, those who are proponent of market access, export restriction, export competitions. We want all these 7 pillars to move forward. We need to know, to let them know that the majority of that, each of that pillar have a different maturity. So we are engaging with anyone. If you want to know the last 1 month of class, we are never saying that domestic support, we want to hold that. No, we hearing what the proponent want on domestic support. We are supporting if there's any discussion on market access. We will be here. We don't say no to that idea. We are listening. We are giving positive engagement. We're not saying no. We're not doing negative engagement in each of that export, market access, export decision. So that's on the agriculture. And the second one on long-term customization. This is also very important for us. Is the idea of I think Indonesia have said many things on the floor and also outside to the public that this is more about policy space for us. The idea of it's been 20 years. This is not the e-commerce as a whole. This is only the electronic transmissions, the custom duty. So if you purchase e-commerce from, let's say, Amazon and import to Indonesia, we're not talking about that. We're talking about electronic transmissions that transmit electronically from outside Indonesia to Indonesia, outside the country to our domestic country. That's the idea. I mean, is at this point also we see how we can have the data, because this is important. It's a cross-border. If you see like goods export from Indonesia outside, we can monitor. Let's say we produce agriculture, we export to another country. When it leaves the borders, we know how much is that agriculture. We know how is it apple, is it rice. We can record that and make that as a data. That's important to explore our industry, or the other way around. If import coming in on agriculture, we can have that data. So that's, at this point, we want to be at that position. We can have a lot of data. Where goods, electronic transmission coming in, or electronic transmission going out. So we can align our policy, align our objective to preserve this good economy that we can support, policy that can support this industry, policy that can support this electronic transmissions. It's very important. Otherwise, if we don't have data, where we can buy the data. When we talk to our private sector SMEs or even big company, what do we need? What the policy that we can provide for that industry to grow? That's one of, beside policy space, we also see how important it is to monitor, to have that data, so we can have the right policy in place for the industry to grow. We can export more electronic transmission software outside Indonesia, or we can import it. It should be a right policy tools, a policy space that we are aiming. Just one more thing. If you look at the whole Indonesia 100% income, even from tax, non-tax, from custom. From our custom, we only have about 4 to 5% of all that income. So it's a small numbers compared to tax, compared to non-tax. If we want to increase that by imposing a custom duty on electronic transmissions, we will need to know how big it is. But eventually, it's not going to increase that much. So we are trying to maintain the right level of that custom duties, because we're not focusing. We're focusing on how we can. It shows that Indonesia have a free market. the goods coming in, it's not much that we are imposing customs. I think I can stop there. And for you, Abhijit, you should hear my middle name. My last name is Iswara, my middle name is Satlia. So 2 gods in my name.
That's two pieces of bread.
2 pieces of bread.
Okay.
One for agriculture, one for e-commerce.
Okay, so let me hand it over to Abhijit and then I'll come back to Helene.
Thank you to my friend from the media from Washington. I will just mention the 2 different aspects of the Nairobi Ministerial Declaration and how they are linked to what I have said. What paragraph 30 of the Nairobi Ministerial Declaration said is that other members do not reaffirm the Doha mandates. So clearly, the Doha mandates on most of the issues were lost. There was no multilateral endorsement. But having said that, there's also a separate paragraph in Nairobi Ministerial Declaration which says we will welcome the progress in the DDA, which is embodied in the following decisions and declarations that we've adopted. And these included decisions, declarations on public stock holding, SSM, cotton, and few other issues. So clearly, these 3 issues, despite there not being a multilateral reaffirmation of the Doha mandate at Nairobi, these 3 issues in a way still were extricated from a dying corpse and preserved for further action. In other words, these 3 issues were kept at a separate pedestal. Now, what is sought to be done now by some countries is to say, forget whatever we did at Nairobi. We will put everything in one negotiating basket. And that's where I have a problem. Past ministerial commitments, members have to deliver on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abhijit. I think even from MC12, we've been seeing that these issues with, as Abhijit said, with reaffirmed mandates from Nairobi, they were being given offered deadlines. The agriculture decision fell through even in MC12. But the other issues were getting the same deadline, like it was supposed to be MC13 for all the issues together, which was a big problem for developing countries. Okay, then let me hand it to Jane first, then I'll go to Helena. I mean, any thoughts, any responses, or any last comments?
Maybe as a last comment, I think it's really important to bring a number of issues together when we are talking about agriculture. And I think another issue which we really need to look at is the issue of climate change and how it's going to be addressed within the WTO. For me, that's just a food for thought. You know, what do we want to see? Should it be in the WTO or should it be in the UNFCCC and that other arena? Another issue is the fact that also we are also looking at a generation of issues in a number of areas, areas of investment. Like I have said, these are areas which are also going to affect agriculture. For example, when you look at also in other forests like Uktad, there is a degeneration when you come to the WTO. So we have a challenge of how we can be able to ensure coherence in these international organizations which purport to work on the same issue. But I think as civil society, I think we need to continue putting these issues on the agenda, because I remember one time there was a talk about the 21st century issues, like as if issues on agriculture are outdated, you know, and they were telling us, we need 21st century issues. So we need to make agriculture still a very important issue and ensure that it remains on the agenda.
Thank you so much, Jane. Helena?
Well, I don't know if I have much to add, but I do think that it is important. All of us who eat food need actually to have policies that secure that it can happen. And what is reality is that it is easily, and I find it in my own delegation in Norway, I find that the argument all the time is that we don't need to talk about those old issues. Let's continue with new issues. And still, it's food all of us eat, and that is a key. And I think that the explanation and the way to deal with the public stockholding issue is really is one of the big issues now, and that could easily be solved. Is, you know, the ambassador, the way you explain it is so sensible. So, you know, in the terms of, you know, this is a natural thing to just do. I think what is key here is that it is all about different interests. And it's easy not to talk about it because it is a lot of conflicting interests here. But then again, those to be secure is those who actually need those policies to both survive and develop its people. Thank you.
Oh, okay, pardon. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, this question is to Ambassador. I don't want to put him in a corner because Indonesia, along with India and South Africa, is leading that push for discontinuation of the e-moratorium, which I support. I work in digital issue, but I still never actually can understand what this moratorium is about. And Indonesia first in Argentina put the distinction between transmission and content. Though they did it beautifully because I think it's basically trying to defeat the other side's intentions, and I'll come to it. I still do not understand, and I would like to find an example of an e-transmission which actually can be text, is what you're thinking. And in between the last part of what you said, you mentioned software. And I think that's the dangerous thing, is basically increasingly the global flow of value would, cross-border flow of value would be in form of digital services. It's that AI services coming from the US and managing your agriculture or managing your e-commerce, etc. And it seems that the effort, and much of it is called software, which is a streaming real-time software which is controlling Amazon. What exactly is this? What is, for example, I'm coming back to the question, give me an example of what kind of transmission can actually be, a custom duty can be put, and whether it is largely not a preemptive effort to anticipate the possibility of taxing digital services across borders. And that's what is an effort that the other side wants to stop. Can you give me an example of transmission which can be taxable actually?
Okay.
I have a second question, more related to.
Do you want the mic?
No, this one doesn't work, so I'm going to start it. I have a question related to the topic of the roundtable about agriculture. We see right now there is like demonstration in Europe from farmers complaining about free trade agreements and public support for fair prices. You have the same, so my question is about to Ranja or Adishi. You have actually the same right now in India demonstration of farmers. Can you maybe briefly make a link between the negotiation that are happening this week with what is currently the claims of this demonstration? I guess for people it could be like a striking example of how WTO is relevant for agriculture. Yes, thank you.
Okay, are there any more questions? Okay, then Ambassador. Sorry. Oh, okay,
Well,
yeah, this one.
Just another dumb question, which has to do with public stockholding. Are you looking for an agreement here on public stockholding? I mean, a permanent solution. Do you still think that's in the realm of possibility that there would be a permanent solution agreed here at MC13? That's my question.
Okay, so 2 questions to you. And we've moved also into e-commerce.
Yes.
That's good.
All right. kind of technical, but I'll try to answer that. Probably my expert will help me on that. Because if you are trying to build that, yeah.
I'll catch him later on, but
Please catch it. You have a handcuff, please catch it. Go ahead. Just make sure that there are differences between tangible and intangible goods. So probably those are distinct between electronic transmission and transmitted content. Probably you're right, like a movie, Netflix, where they come in and sell, or there's other intangible goods. Please catch him. If you need my help, I'll catch him too. And if I again respond to you that we are been doing for the last 2 years on engaging. Of course, it's been hard, and we want that as an outcome. I mean, it's a negotiations at this point, where the other side seeing no permanent solutions, or the other side saying we have to have all the outcome on all 7 pillars. We're engaging. We're open. We're not polluting the other article on market access, domestic support, and others. We are engaging in pushing for these others articles. So that's kind of for us is also important. Up until now, we're still pushing for financialization of PSH. That's very important because again, 80 members within that proposal 229. It consists 80% of populations. China is there, India is there, Indonesia, Pakistan, Nigeria. So this a lot of populations, a country do need that public stockholding, and of course this is negotiations. We're open for any comment or the convergence of any of that issues up until now, because I think agriculture will be up tomorrow on the second day, agriculture and fisheries subsidies. Of course, after hearing all that ministers are engaging with each other, we are still pushing. It means that we are showing how important it is as permanent solutions, and we're also seeing how important it is an outcome in agriculture. Also, I hope we can help to answer your question.
Thank you very much. So it's still on the table, and it's important for all the proponents. So you are still fighting. Okay, Abhijit,
on the Jonas' question about are there linkages between what's happening in Europe and what's happening in India, I think
and then what's happening in the WTO?
At the end of the day, farmers in developed countries as well as developing countries are dissatisfied for different reasons, but they are dissatisfied. Let's accept that point. How that dissatisfaction, what are the reasons for that dissatisfaction, in a way tells us where the problems really lie. In Europe, maybe there is reluctance to agree to a situation where some imports come in, or where the government might want to reduce subsidies. In a country like India, there's dissatisfaction. There is an aspiration that minimum support price scheme must have a legal guarantee. But the short point is there is dissatisfaction. It's really up to the national authorities to see how this dissatisfaction can be addressed and what implication does it have for the WTO. I think the implication is simple. I'm talking from the perspective of developing countries. Preserve the policy space so that whatever domestic reforms a developing country has to do, that country has the flexibility to decide the pace of the reform, the depth of reform, the transition period over which it has to do the reform. If on the other hand, the reform is to be guided totally by WTO rules without having any policy flexibility, then the risks of the developing country making a mess of the reform become very, very high. And that's a general point about policy space, not only in agriculture, but even in the industrial sector. So I don't know, Jonas, whether I have answered your question, but broadly, that is what I would think are the linkages and the implications and relevance for WTO. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Abhijit. And I also wanted to add on that, for example, what Abhijit said, that farmers are dissatisfied, but they are dissatisfied for different but also very common reasons. I mean, in our countries, in developing countries, we've been fighting against trade liberalization because we are worried that, subsidized exports from the West would come and they have flooded our markets. And European farmers are similarly worried about now, lowering import duties for products from Ukraine or wherever. So they are facing the same challenges. And also it was interesting because I think the European farmers, because now they're having to pay a cost for sustainability standards, right? And we know that EU is kind of trying to bring in, not only the EU, we've also seen it from the Keynes group, this sustainability related language that should be coming into the agriculture discussions. We should have maybe not negotiations, but two parallel frameworks, whether it's on food security or reform, reset, that sustainability is supposed to be a major objective. And of course, we all know that we have to, whether it's agriculture, whatever, we are all moving towards a sustainable pathways. But what we would also be concerned about are the costs that it imposes. And if you can imagine the cost that it imposes already on European farmers, who are on an average, we can assume to be richer, that they are coming out on the streets to protest, and how much costly that if these standards were to come in, they're already coming in through trade agreements. For example, EU has the sustainable food system, its own take on sustainable food system, so on. These could be very, very costly for our farmers. So there are many common threads, and and Abhijit said Indian farmers' protest is not about preserving their right to the minimum support price, expanding its scope, and all of this, lot of this is actually not possible under the current WTO rules. So thank you very much. So if there are no more questions, comments, we are also reaching the end of this time-wise of this session. So thank you very much. I will not bother to summarize, but I think the question of policy space for every country, right? Both developed and developing, especially for developing, because they are grappling with much more, these harsh realities on the ground, and that WTO, as you were saying, in a way has to change course and recognize now the need for policy space for our countries, and especially for a critical sector like agriculture. We also do not want, just WTO, it keeps talking about trade liberalization, but it has to recognize the space for domestic production, domestic, development of the agriculture sector, and it cannot just kind of stamp those policy options out. So with that, let me also just tell you that there are letters by Indian farmers groups. There's a brief on agriculture at the back. If any of you are interested, you can pick it up. And we also have an event, a press briefing, in fact, like a media event on the fisheries subsidies negotiation. We have fishers groups from Indonesia, Bangladesh, India, and we would really like them to speak to the media. So tomorrow, that's at 1:30. I think it's the same room, room 2. And we will put out information and flyers on this. Thank you very much. And let me thank then our speakers. Ambassador, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it, and all the best to you for the next few days. Thanks to Helena, Jane, and Abhijit for joining and making this. Thank you. I think this was a very rich and interesting session, and thank you. Thanks to all of you for staying on.